Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bedomy, and this is, it's the regular show I'm gonna do on occasion when I won't say I'm bored, but when I do come up with an idea for a discussion about a certain topic about video gaming or anime or movie industry, depending on what tickles my fancy at the moment. I honestly didn't think of a title just yet, so, I'm just gonna give you my 2 cents about topics and then we'll go with that. Anyway, for this video I'd like to discuss the idea of open world games. And why are they, I wanted to say unhealthy, but that's a big misuse of the word unhealthy, so redundant, let's go with that one. I'm not trying to say that those games are unnecessary in this day and age. They are a pretty big industry at this point, but they're not as impactful as they once were. You see, open world games were once used as a good showcase for both console and game developers, as it demonstrated how far their rendering and processing technology has advanced. I'm not kidding. In the late 90s, early 2000s, 3D graphics were relatively a new technology, so whoever could create bigger and better animated worlds was considered a technological deity. And the people who could actually develop hardware that could render that software without any trouble were also considered deities, so they were pretty sought out when it came to employment. And I just realized I screwed up on the last sentence. Basically, I was trying to say that the programmers who could incorporate all those animations, AI processes, as well as gameplay features into one whole smooth operation that would render perfectly on, well, not just render, but play on the consoles or the PCs, I was referring to them. They were considered deities, not the animators. Granted, I also think that animators who had to work on 3D models and animations were also deities of their own. But I was trying to say that programmers who were working on the games were considered, they were very sought after employees. And that's what I'm trying to say. Times were changing, and so did the customer's interest. And considering that the majority of the customer base was children, their interest was usually the newest, shiniest thing they could find on the playground, or on the store shelf in this case. And as we can all see, 3D games are still pretty popular and active in this day and age. Especially if those games feature real-world, not simulations, but big open areas where we can do virtually anything and get away with it. Mostly reckless driving and murder, but there are some other features you can do, like rob a store, or a bank, or explore uncharted waters and hidden caverns, or raid tombs. The possibilities were endless at that time. But as years went by, that formula kinda got stale. Tell me if you heard this one. You can explore wherever you want, go wherever you want, do what you want, and be what you want. And no, before you start singing, a pirate is free, you are a pirate, no, that's not it. But it is a nice try though. Granted, that answer does reflect certain opinions on how we should pay certain publishers for their products, but I do not encourage it, but I do say you can do it if you consider the publisher questionable on the moral compass. But that's a topic for another time. Our current topic is open world games and what can be done to improve them. At least the modern ones. The old classics are classics for a reason. I mean, look at San Andreas. It was not as revolutionary as GTA 3, but it did add a lot of features that people were asking for when GTA 3 was released. You could swim, improve your character's abilities if you repeated certain actions, and some of them even affected how you performed in the game itself. If you went to the gym, you became a better melee fighter. If you used a specific weapon, you became more proficient with it. You could reload faster, you could maybe dual wield if it was a small arms fire weapon. You could swim, if I didn't mention that already. And basically the world became bigger. And you had more to explore and do in it. You had side missions, dates, NPC recruitment, and missions that gradually unlocked new gameplay elements as you progressed the story. At one point you had to learn how to fly a plane in order to progress through the story. And things were interesting because an NPC, I won't say companion, but mission giver, did give you a couple of calls in order to remind you that you had to finish that mission in order to progress through the story. Well, not just remind you, but threaten you into doing it. And considering how entertaining those threats were, I kinda postponed that mission for as long as I could in order to hear as many of those threats as possible. And that's the key thing here. Entertainment. By doing something or avoiding to do something, I triggered an entertaining conversation or an entertaining animation or an entertaining event. And most modern games just don't do it. They put you in a big world and just show you where everything interesting and entertaining will be located. It takes out the charm of exploration. It just go to that location, do this and that, and you'll be rewarded with an entertaining cutscene or a new gameplay mechanic that will be used once and never again. And that or an interesting level that can only be accessed through glitches, mods, cheats, or developer console. Depends on where you play it. But here's the thing. If that level is present on the map, I should be able to access it. Without any exploits. There should be some repercussions if I attempt to enter a restricted area, but I should be able to enter it. But no. That area was made for a specific purpose, for a specific time, and you can only access it at one specific moment. And never again. Which is rather infuriating when you think about it. More effort is put into a smaller map with a cinematic experience and a linear story you have to follow than into an open world that lets you tackle the mission from every angle you wish to. Should let you tackle every mission in the way you want to, but no. Once you get close to the mission area, the game will spawn in a border that will end the mission automatically if you leave the area. And that kinda kills my interest, honestly. I cannot survey the area in order to find another entrance. I have to go for that one heavily guarded entrance that the developers want you to go to. Sure, you might get a chance to sneak by some enemies or utilize different form of cover, but you're mostly fed breadcrumbs that you have to follow in order to progress the story in a desired way, or in any way at all. In most cases, if you stray from the path, you just get automatically killed. Or the mission ends automatically and you have to redo it. Basically, you get treated like a lab rat. Unless you ring all the bells correctly, you won't get food. Granted, not all games do this, but I wouldn't be mentioning this if it wasn't a trend. Some games utilize the open world intelligently. Take a look at Cyberpunk or Metal Gear Solid, for instance. Their missions are structured like this. Get to this area and do this. And boom, that's the whole thing. There are scripted events in those games as well, but they are evenly spread so they do not intrude on the whole game itself. And you can easily avoid those situations if you know what will trigger them. Not indefinitely, but you will have enough time to prepare for them. Let's say you came across an area that says this is a boss arena. Your first instinct would probably be to scour the area for extra ammunition and search for traps that the enemy might have placed around the area, or place some of your own traps and neutralize the guards. And then you trigger the boss fight and win with relative ease. That's because the game not only allowed you, but encouraged you to utilize all of its mechanics to your advantage. And speaking of boss fights, let's talk about the enemy variety, or lack thereof. At least in the modern world parody types of open world games genre. Okay, I'm not sure how what I call it, but the open world games where you don't have fantasy or science fiction setting, where your only opponents are humans, basically. Okay, that's not a good way of putting it. If you ever played Assassin's Creed or any historical open worlds, you also fight only human bots, but there is some variation between the enemies since there are historical weaponry involved. You can fight long-range musketeers and close-ranged pistolers and swordsmen or other melee fighters, but in modern-day human society open-world game, that's where my problem lies. You can only fight the police officers, the military, and criminal organizations. And all of them are very similar when it comes to mechanics. Tell me if you can spot the difference. Quick! The player character is fighting our forces. We will pinpoint his location to you on the map, and once we get there, we will hide behind closest cover and shoot at him from a safe distance. Tell me, which faction was that? And before you say it, no, despite the voice, it's not the military. Well, technically speaking, it can be the military, but the point is, all of these factions play the same. They have access to different weaponry, but most of their mechanics and tactics are virtually universal. All of them will just know automatically where you're hiding, and they will just come in droves to shoot at you. There is no variation to them. You would think that the street gang, which has access to pistols and Uzis, and possibly a couple of shotguns and assault rifles, and maybe a grenade or two, might play differently from the military, but no. All of them just run towards the closest cover and shoot at you from a safe distance, if you're out in the open. But if you find cover, they will try to flush you out with grenades and rush your position to shoot you at point blank range, but there is no variation on how they fight. And that's really disappointing. You would think that an army-trained personnel who have access to very lethal weaponry would fight differently from regular street thugs. For example, let's say I encountered a group of soldiers and decided to attack them. I'm not wearing any armor, I'm just carrying a pistol and maybe a submachine gun or an assault rifle. Let's go with submachine gun. So I sneak up to them and shoot one of them in the back of the head. I might be able to headshot another soldier while they're still looking for my location, but then a firefight ensues. In the real world, I'd probably get gunned down in 5 seconds. But in the game, I'd probably kill 50 or 60 of them before I even get a scratch. And that's the problem. The game will just spawn in more and more enemies. Maybe from a different angle, but their tactics will remain the same. Find cover, shoot at player. If the player is behind cover for X amount of time, throw a grenade. Or get closer and repeat the process. And that's how every firefight goes, no matter the faction or the situation. Well, it will end if you get killed or run away, but the consequences aren't so severe. If you get killed, you'll lose some money, and if you run away, you'll have to wait for the search timer to run out. And the whole map resets the status quo, which is rather uninteresting in my opinion. Things happen, and people remember it. And it would bring a lot to the gameplay if characters remembered what you did in the world before you got killed or before you escaped. Just look at Shadow of Mordor or War for Mordor, the Middle-earth series created by Monolith Studios, basically. Or Metal Gear Solid Phantom Pain. Those games will adjust their worlds and gameplay according to your actions in the game itself. For example, in Shadow of Mordor, if you fight an orc multiple times and escape or get killed by him, he will reference those actions and outcomes, and even develop certain strengths and weaknesses against certain tactics or attacks. Or take a look at Phantom Pain. If you continuously use headshots, the enemies will start using helmets. Or if you conduct your missions during the nighttime, they'll start using flashlights and night vision goggles. Most of these counters to your playstyles are already pre-programmed into the game, but you have to do these actions repeatedly in order to unlock them. But it still creates the illusion that the enemies are adapting to your playstyle, and you have to think of a new strategy in order to deal with those new challenges, which in turn promotes exploration and discovery of new gameplay mechanics and features. A good example of that is Shadow of Mordor again. Let's say I try to poison one boss, but failed. That boss now has developed an immunity to poison. So I have to adjust my strategy and approach and find a different way to actually end his life or enslave him. While I was busy with that, the said orc tried to usurp his leader and got killed because of it. And now some other orc took his place. So the world dynamic just changed dramatically without me influencing it. And that was just wonderful. Something big happened, and the game didn't force me to drop whatever I was doing to witness it. It just shows how organic the world is. You're just a part of the world, not its deity. Well, technically speaking, you are a deity of warfare when it comes to action games, but you don't have to babysit everything. You just have to run around big empty spaces and kill everything. And occasionally stop by somewhere to resupply your inventory. You might encounter some NPCs that will ask you to run and gun in a specific order, but it's usually more of the same. Just get there in a specific amount of time and kill a specific person. There might be a minigame or two to deviate the formula, but everything boils down to run and gun someone. Just follow the yellow dotted line towards the X and do your thing. Speaking of dotted lines, why are they so prominent? Navigation should be a big key of open world games. So why don't we use the game's world to navigate ourselves? Oh wait! There is nothing distinctive in the area that can help me navigate. And even if there was, I'd probably miss it because I zoomed right past it at 100 miles per hour. This wouldn't be so much of a problem if the map was smaller and better organized. But here we are, on a big open map with nothing to do and nothing to orientate ourselves with. We do have a minimap that will show us the quickest way to our next location, and the nearest collectibles, as well as NPCs with quests. And maybe, well, not maybe, but usually, it shows there are enemies in the area. Whoop-de-freaking-do. What's next? Finish the whole game with a single press of a button? I know this is an old joke, but it does have some merit to it. The developers are lazy to create interesting content. They just make a big world and tell you to go nuts. With what exactly? The same randomly generated go there kill someone missions, or forgettable tennis and basketball matches that you will play once or twice and never again? Or maybe one of those races that are so heavily stacked in the player's favor that they're not even worth mentioning. And even if they weren't stacked in my favor, I'd still ignore them because there is no incentive for me to do them. What do I get if I win them all? A new car that's faster? I just won every single race in the city. So by some logic that indicates my car is one of the faster ones. Okay, my driving skills are also part of the equation, but why would I need a new car if the one I have is already fast? Will I get some money if I win? That is pointless considering that I get more by simply selling the junk I looted from my enemy's corpses. And even if it's a big sum of money, what can I spend it on? Weapons and armor? I already have those. Additional upgrades for my vehicles and houses? I have already maxed those out. So, what else can I spend it on? Is there an endgame content I can spend this money on? Is there an endgame content that I can play with? And before anyone starts telling me that the endgame is in the multiplayer, no. I'm asking about the single player portion of the game. Tell me, what was the last GTA expansion that included content for single player only? Let me know in the comments, I'm not gonna answer that one. Just make sure it's focused primarily on the single player portion of the game, not GTA Online. If it's a GTA Online expansion with some small content for the single player, that doesn't count. It just shows how little care the developers have for their community. They got your money and they will let the modders do whatever they want with the single player content. They might support the multiplayer for a while, but even then they will abandon it when it's not profitable. Oh wait, I didn't mean the developers, I meant the publishers. The publishers don't care about the community. I'm pretty sure the developers do care about their communities. Most of them at least. The publishers usually make things difficult for everyone, especially for the modding community. If the mod proves to be a better product than the original, they pursue the poor modders with everything they have. Legally speaking, not guns or anything explicit. Okay, I'm pretty sure that didn't have to be said, but you never know. Anyway, where were we? Oh yes, the maps and their size. I have nothing against big maps, but if they're too big and have nothing else of interest in them, I am not gonna play them for long. They are fun areas to drive through, but if you want to explore them on foot, you're gonna be bored to tears. Most open areas have nothing distinctive about them, so you cannot orientate yourself with the usage of the environment, and you have to resolve to using the minimap, which kills the point of exploring. I can understand the big open areas from a designer's perspective. They're there to encourage the player to drive around and try out some stunts, but if the vehicle breaks down and the player is in the middle of nowhere, what's he gonna do? He'll have to waste 10 or 20, well, not 20, but 15 minutes walking backwards in order to find a new vehicle. And that's stupid. Okay, it's a fitting punishment for being too reckless with your vehicle, but you're still boring the player, and he might stop playing afterwards. If the map was smaller, the boredom would be nullified, but the punishment would also be nullified as well. Which is understandable, but you could probably implement some gameplay mechanics that can rectify that situation. Maybe a more advanced police AI that can punish you with minigames similar to Bully, or a fine system similar to Mafia. Or maybe take inspiration from Yakuza series and just put your open world into a small town district. And divide it into regions with distinctive characteristics so people can orientate themselves. While that might seem like a bad idea on paper, if you put interesting side content into the map, the world will seem bigger. Because the people will put time and effort into learning the map's layout and how to interact with certain characters and other objects in order to achieve the best results. Which is having fun. Seriously, on my first playthrough of Yakuza 0, my top priority was not to finish the story, but to become the first-class manager of the cabaret. And that was a side story. But I digress. Let's take a look at the multiplayer side of things and then we can end the video soon enough. Big maps can be fun when you're playing with a lot of people. But the problem is, most of them are usually developed with paid, I won't say pay to win, but some paid mechanics in mind. Some people can pay for jetpacks or stronger tanks or better vehicles in general or better guns. And if you involve hackers into the mix, things get really hectic. It can be fun, but if you're playing on your own, you're going to have a bad time. Not always, but you will be caught in the crossfire between hackers and groups of people who just want to cause mayhem. And that can be pretty frustrating if you just want to drive around or do something specific. If you have friends you can play online with, that's great, play it with them. But you might want to investigate the possibility of a private server. But that's just my opinion. Some games really benefit from an open map design, but not all of them. If you want to make a cinematic experience, just make a linear game that has a consistent plot and gameplay, and don't give me an open map that has nothing to do in it. And those are my 2 cents on the matter. If anybody has anything to add to this, just put it in the comments and I'll respond as soon as possible. And if you're a game developer working on an open world game, I sincerely hope that some of the topics we were discussing here will help you develop a better experience. And that's about it from me. Thank you very much for watching, my name has been Bedomy, and good night.